Hi folks, you're with Tas today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a run of recent articles I've seen on activist sort of media platforms, but also on business media platforms that increasingly have become activist in the globalist cause. We have to remember anything we see, hear, touch, or notice, or any information anywhere has been completely taken over. But it's a wall of propaganda from all sides, and the business sites that used to be about business are now as much purveyors of globalist propaganda as any other media outlet. And so a number of articles have appeared across, again, a number of outlets alleging that students from the Indian subcontinent, this could include India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or even Sri Lanka for that matter, the students that come to Australia, and the inference is the West generally, but specifically Australia in these articles, these Indian students that come to Australia must all be guaranteed a full-time job while they are students, and again, once they graduate from whatever course they're studying. Now, this is not I don't know, unemployment, there's so many jobs going unfilled in Australia, and, with all these people here, wouldn't it be nice if we could get them into employment? It would kind of help. But that's not the direction that the media pieces go in. It would be untrue. I mean, so there are some that try and play that card, but the reality is that there's no shortage of workers in Australia, be they students or anyone else, and therefore, why should Indians or subcontinent people be uniquely entitled to employment as opposed to any other group or any local people and so on? So it's an idiotic position to take. But instead of arguing the rational economics of it all, they just go straight to the racism thing. So now, apparently, so the article claims between 50 and 60% of Indian students in Australia have full-time employment. Now, that's an incredibly high rate of full-time employment. So God knows what they're studying. Maybe they're only studying part-time or something rather than full-time. So that's a very high rate of full-time employment for a student. Now, if we look at casual employment, then over 90%, in fact, closer to 95% of Indian students have casual employment. Now, once they graduate, apparently the situation is slightly better, like about 63% have full-time employment. And those that don't have full-time employment have part-time employment. And now part-time employment can be 30 hours a week instead of 40 hours, so very close to a full-time employment situation. And they don't sort of classify people are only getting 5 hours a week of work as opposed to 10 hours or 20 hours or whatever. So the Indian or subcontinent students, while they're studying and after studying, have very high rates of employment. Now, why is that a problem? I mean, it's not a problem as far as I can tell, but the insistence in the article is that every one of these people is entitled, all of them are entitled to a full-time job. And if they're not provided with that through affirmative action programs, whatever, if they don't achieve that outcome, then it's because of fucking fascist Nazi, fucking bigotry, Hitler, that's holding them back or preventing them from doing that. So this is a ridiculous and insane assertion, but that's so. Why should these people be uniquely singled out for such an entitlement to be guaranteed a full-time job? I mean, wow! I don't know any other class of people that is to be guaranteed a full-time job, regardless of any form of merit. I just want to go back now to when mass migration first began, but before the affirmative action programs came along, or certainly in Australia anyway. So when mass migration began, a lot of the Indians always clamour to come to the first world country, while at the same time denigrating first world countries being wicked, evil, bad, racist, Nazi, and so on. Spiritually inferior, morally inferior, culturally inferior, but they all want to come here anyway, and then hate and despise us when they get here. It's a strange sort of combination here, very chip on shoulder. Nonetheless, the Indians clamour to come here, and they will bribe whoever they have to get here and do. But this was before affirmative action. So the Indians would arrive, but they couldn't compete. Their qualifications, it's a third, a corrupt basket case, third world country, and their qualifications didn't cut it here. They weren't recognised or accepted. The Indians that were doing courses, bridging courses, say could be in say medicine, for example, doctors, to do a bridging course, most of them, vast majority of them were flunking. So people that were claiming to have triple PhDs ended up driving taxis, and then complaining about how evil and racist Australia was. But well, why didn't you go back to India then? I mean, gee whiz, if you've got a triple PhD in medicine, surely you can do okay over there. But they didn't want to go back for some reason. Now, gradually, and really within the space of a few years, I suppose, the government in Australia and the West generally started instituting affirmative action programs. Now, I just want to sort of give you the thing. Indian students at school weren't doing any better than anyone else. They weren't doing any good. They probably had a better study ethic than a lot of the say poorer white people did, but nothing exceptional. So the kids weren't doing particularly well at school or at university. There was no notable rate of achievement. Those that came from India with qualifications, those qualifications typically weren't worth a pinch of shit. And certainly, the alleged expert computer coders and programmers that I hired when they first started arriving, because their CVs were so fantastic. I found they couldn't even cut a line of code to save their lives. I'm sure some of them could, but the ones that initially came over with all these triple PhDs, that they didn't know shit. So the Indian diaspora wasn't doing well in Australia. They couldn't compete with the locals. Some of them had never worked. Many of them, if they had worked, it had only been in a family business. It was a monopoly. So it's not like they had to compete in a marketplace and do good quality work or anything like that. Those, particularly the Brahmins, the upper class, they were just gifted socially prestigious jobs where they didn't have to do anything except run around looking, pretending to be important and significant. So the sort of people coming here had nothing to contribute to the economy. They had no skills, they had no work ethic, they had fuck all. So the government introduced the only way that the government was, or the only way these Indians or the black and brown people generally, the only way they were going to get employed was through affirmative action programs. The only way they were going to come first in the exams was through affirmative action programs. The only way they were going to, get their PhDs was through affirmative action. Now, I've done that. There are, I'm sure you can find some. I mean, there's a population of 1.4 billion. I'm sure you can find some clever people who can do it on merit. Just not very many. And it's not an economy or a social structure that appreciates it or admires or accepts merit as having any place in how things are organised and run and how things are delivered and created. So when the affirmative action kicked in, then suddenly everything changed. The government took a view, state, federal and local, of employing Indians in all areas of government, and it was almost like a switch was flicked. Suddenly there were Indian alleged engineers and Indian alleged doctors and Indian, they're just everywhere. And again, people who hundreds, if not thousands, of local white Australians would have been bypassed in order just to affirmatively action and employ these Indians, or people from the subcontinent generally. And while all the time, running around saying how socially virtuous, these policies were. But it created a very different different situation in employment and job delivery terms and so on. But it was to the direct disadvantage of the local white population, which is why I think if it didn't solve any problems, if it did achieve anything at all, and I don't believe it did, it just moved the problem around. So, well, you can't compete and you can't get jobs on your own merit, so we'll just create a situation where we gift you the jobs regardless, jobs otherwise that white people would have had. So, the very basics of that I would disagree with. So now we've got a situation on top of that these articles are arguing that people from the subcontinent should be guaranteed employment, and to not do so is racist and Nazi and so on and so forth. And that to me is an absolute outrage and utterly ridiculous. Now, for those of you who haven't been to India or dealt with the Indian sort of view of the world is 2 for 1. To get anything done, you have to bribe somebody. It's generically referred to in India as bakshish, kickbacks or under the table payments. So to get anything done, you have to bribe somebody, and that's just an accepted way of life. It's not considered unusual or there's nothing wrong about it. Just how things are. It's the natural order of things in their view. Now, so as a result of that, merit will never play a significant role in India. Now, a lot of the Indians that come here, whether as students or others, they come here and say, well, they want to get away from the overcrowding, the religious riots, which are just permanent in India, and they want to get away from the corruption, and they want to have reliable public services, and they want to have clean streets, and they want to have, and so on and so forth. And they say that Australia delivers all of those things in a vastly higher quality of life. So Australia delivers a much better quality of life, a much better day-to-day life, whilst at the same time being a nation of evil fucking fascist Nazis. I mean, go figure that one if you can. So they come to Australia, and the first thing they want to do is recreate the religious tensions of where they came from. So every time there's a religious festival, like an Indian festival or any major Indian political event, then the Indians, the Hindu nationalists and so on, they're on the streets in the major cities here, running around, rioting and carrying on. I mean, you've come to another country. If you want to be so embroiled in day-to-day Indian affairs, go back to India. I mean, Jesus. But no, they want to stay here and have their rights. So they're bringing all the Indian problems to Australia, and in areas where there's a lot of Brahmins, and where you see, say, there's some high schools in Australia now which are nearly 100% Indian, and they're recreating their class system in Australia. So they're recreating the Brahmins and the untouchables. They're recreating the caste system here in Australia, and they're bringing their religious tensions, religious problem. They want to bribe everybody and anybody. They also come with the view, in terms of business, they come with the view that the world, and I've mentioned this many times before, but in the world there is a fixed pot of money. It is exactly the same. It is unchanging. And the only way you can get more is by taking it from the next guy. The idea of wealth creation and all this sort of thing is that they just don't understand it. That they think it's some sort of hocus pocus bullshit that white people say to steal from them or something like that. But so they see it's a fixed pot of money. So only by deceiving, and they take great store. And if you can deceive someone else and get their money, then you're a heavy hitter. You're one hell of a sharp dude if you can do that. So there's a natural level of deceit in how they do business, even ones that are born here, strangely. So they don't come to contribute commercially. Now, most of the jobs that the Indians get, other than the affirmative action ones, are jobs where Indian financial firms buy up franchises or chains or take out food and that sort of thing, and then in order to make that business viable and to maximize the profit, they have to import peasants from the rural areas, illiterate peasants to work there and do all the donkey work, the burger flipping, whatever. And so they bring these people out under false pretenses, under these brazen skilled worker scams, and put them in. So when you look at the article arguing that Indians should be uniquely entitled to full-time jobs, scams, and put them in. So when you look at the article arguing that Indians should be uniquely entitled to to full-time jobs while they're students and thereafter. I'd like to know the source of the. There's the usual suspects, you know. The NGOs are declaring it, then it goes to an activist media outlet and so on. But it appears to be what the globalists are wanting, and I'm sure they're wanting that as a device to attract yet more, people from the subcontinent to move to the West. I just want to sort of that there are more Indians in India than there are white people in the entire Western diaspora. I just contemplate that. So with this encouraging of Indians to move to the West, if Indians in large numbers did move to the West, the Western white population would cease to exist for the next 25 to 50 years. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.